podcast today, friends. We have another exciting guest on this podcast. This is an individual who is an author and an advocate for a different form of government. He wrote a book called The Fallacy of Good Government, and he's going to talk to us about his philosophy of government and how we can change government for the better. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
If we get started, be kindly give me an introduction to yourself, a brief biographical sketch.
It changed again, but I am a chemical process and product development engineer. I do mostly research and development in electrochemical processes, and over the years, I've always had a dual role between law and science, but more government than law, and there is a difference. And so I retired from engineering, and I turned my engineering training and background on understanding our government and trying to improve our government or fix it if necessary. And that's how I came to be in government, even though I've been invested in government and thinking about government for the last 50 or more years. So
oh wow.
So it when I first started trying to look at our founding documents and look at our government, I started with the full intention of actually fixing our government like I would any other engineering project. But once I got into our founding documents, I realized that actually we don't need to fix anything. We just need to use what has already been provided for us. But before we can do that, we actually have to understand it. And that's where the problem is today, is that we really don't understand our government and how it's assembled and how it functions. And that's our problem. And we've gotten so far away from the founding principles of government that we really don't have an effective government anymore that functions at all, really. And you know, the way our government was designed, it was designed to eliminate mutability of government and factions. And politics is the mischief of factions. And the way our government was designed, it controls the effects of those mischief of factions. It doesn't stop people forming political parties, but what it does is it stops them from being able to consolidate and spread their influence over a large republic. I'll call it that, because that's what Madison calls it in Federalist Number 10. And he talks about what they did and why they chose a Republican form of government to control that the mischief of factions and to make sure, you know, because the name of those two Federalist papers, 9 and 10 by Hamilton and Madison, are the Union as a safeguard against domestic faction and insurrection. And domestic faction is our political parties. So so they actually designed the government to preclude political parties from being able to influence anything in our government or control anything. So everything we're doing today, as far as our political parties, where they control our legislative assemblies and they control the presidency and they control all the policies that we make, that's actually anti-constitutional.
Oh my!
It's against the Constitution, because the Constitution was written in order to eliminate that type of situation.
Okay, so
And
does the Constitution... Okay, go ahead.
no, you can go ahead.
So does the Constitution explicitly state anything about factions, or is that implicit?
It's what they do is they only talk about the states. See, people don't understand that the Constitution is a participation versus compliance agreement between the states that determines the benefits, the privileges, the rights of participation in decision making, and cost of membership in the union. Okay.
Okay.
And that the states formed a democracy in a Congress of the states. Each state is equal, and each state has equal suffrage. And the union is actually the assembly that is the sovereign. Okay, and each state ceded some sovereignty in order to form the union, but that's only with them participating as equals in the union.
Okay.
So they had, and when you talk about democracy, what you're really saying is they have to agree on everything. They have to agree on all the processes. They have to assembly everything. So the first thing they do is they form the established government authority, which is the states as the union. That's the established government authority. So they make everything from there. And there's nothing that is interpreted. In fact, the Constitution is a very limited document because all it does is it tells you how to assemble the states in Congress as the union and how the states function to determine how the states act as the union. Okay, that's really all the Constitution does. And when we get into this thing where we try to interpret the Constitution and try to find laws and stuff, no, there's no laws in the Constitution. Okay. And if you go to Article 6 of the Constitution, what it says is that this Constitution, which is this assembly, which is the United States and Congress Assembly, okay, is the established government authority, and all the laws and treaties that they make in that assembly are the supreme laws of the land. There are no laws in the Constitution. The United States and Congress assembled make the laws based on the agreement that they came to for how to make the laws. Okay, so this is where the confusion is. We try today to use the Constitution as a weapon to protect us, like Trump right now is doing all these things that he has absolutely no authority to do, and we think that we have to go to take him to court, and he thinks he's protected by the Constitution because of executive powers, and actually that's totally false. The only power there is in our government is held by the states as a union, and that's distributed power, and it's equal. Every state has equal power to make decisions for everything. So if the states wanted to today, they could shut this whole thing down. Why? Because they are the established government authority. They have to agree on how their government works and what it works on, right? Who does what authority they have. And if you actually look at something like Article 2 of the Constitution, all executive powers are contingent on or conditional on decisions made by the United States and Congress assembled. Okay, the president has no powers of their own. They're not autonomous. They can only do what Congress instructs them to do because the states are the ones making the decision. Okay, I'm going a little bit too far down the road because it's hard to kind of understand how the states came to this assembly, a way to a democracy as to govern their decision making, because everything in government is decision making. So you kind of have to go back to the beginning where they declared their independence from the state of Great Britain. Okay. Now I know most people see the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and they start up at the front where it says all men are created equal. But that's not where you need to go. You need to go to the last paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, and it says that they declared their independence from the state of Great Britain because they felt that they ought to be free and independent states with the full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things independent states may by right do. Okay? So what they're saying is that they should have the right to make all the decisions of their state themselves. They don't have to do anything. They don't have but when they declared their independence, they did it in a General Congress, the United States of America and General Congress assembled. And a General Congress doesn't have a process to make decisions, collective decisions. Okay, so the Declaration of Independence only had all the states had to agree unanimously and sign on it in order to be a part of it. And that might be why the Canadian colonies weren't included in the Declaration of Independence, because they didn't agree. But as soon as they signed that paper, yes, they were Confederates because they were states joined in a common cause against a common enemy. But they didn't have any way of making collective decisions. They declared their independence to make their own decisions. So that's why they started writing the Articles of Confederation immediately after signing the Declaration of Independence. Okay, immediately. And it took them about a year because you have unequal states, because you got some that have a large population, some are small, different wealth and all that other kind of stuff. But they all want to be equal when it comes to making decisions. And that's how you came to a democracy. And that's what the Articles of Confederation forms. It forms a democracy, the United States and Congress assembled. And then in Article 1 of the Articles of Confederation, it names the country. It says, the style of this confederacy shall be the United States of America. Okay? And then in the next section, it says that every state will retain their sovereignty and rights and everything except for what they decide together as the United States and Congress assembled. Okay? And that has never changed. Even when they wrote the Constitution of the United States, that didn't change. What the Constitution did was you have unequal states a lot of disparity, I'll call it, between the states and their population and wealth.
Yes.
So when it came to spending money and the cost of things, the wealthy states were minorities in a democracy. Okay, because there are only a few. Today we have the 9 largest states have have a majority of all the people in the 9 largest states. But we have 50 states, right? So that's kind of the situation that they had. But when they make decisions on expenditures, the largest states didn't have any that much influence over the expenditures and how much it would cost them. So they needed to balance that, and that's what they did with the Constitution of the United States. They balanced the legislative process to not to give the large states the power to force what they wanted, but the large states control the scope and cost of all those expenditures and matters, okay? And then those matters are forwarded to the Senate, where the states are equal, as they always are, for concurrence. And the small states have the power of concurrence, because if 9 states in the House formed a majority to pass a measure, when it's transmitted to the Senate, there are 41 small states to reject those measures and return them to the House for reconsideration, along with amendments to advise those 9 largest states what would be necessary to gain the concurrence of the 41 small states. So this balances the legislative process between the large and small states. So when they talk about checks and balances, each house is a check on the other, and it balances the legislative process. That's what checks and balances are. So this is the kind of thing. And when it comes to cost, what they did was, before in the Articles of Confederation, the cost of membership in the Union to pay the debts of the nation, it was based on an assessment of property within each state as a percentage of the aggregate property value of all the states in the Union. Okay?
Okay.
And this was kind of like, it led to a lot of cheating, and especially on assessment, even though they decided together how to assess stuff, there still was a lot of cheating, and it's not really equitable, okay, because the large states have more property and more, so they pay more than the small states do, a lot more, okay? So in order to make it more equitable, what they did was they tied that assessment to the same apportionment for representation in the House per capita, based on an enumeration. And that's what, that same for representation as is for taxes. Okay? That put everything on a per capita basis. This is in mathematics. I'm not sure how good you are in math, but in mathematics, they have what they call a normalization. And that's when you have unequal things that you're trying to join together as one. Okay? You find a common factor among all the ones that you have. And in our case, it's the people. How many people live in each state?
Yeah.
And that determines each state's representation and each state's direct taxes to pay for the expenditures that they make through the legislative process. Okay, so this is normalization. So it puts everything on a per capita basis. So each is still equal. See, when you talk about democracy, you have equality. All the states have to be equal with equal suffrage, and they have apportioned representation and suffrage equally in the House and as equals in the Senate. So they are still equal, and that's why it's a democracy still to this day. Okay. It's a Republican form of government because in order to form the House or the most numerous legislative branch, you have to assemble a representation of the population of each state. A representation, which is a smaller version of the full population. It has to look exactly like the full population. Okay? So you have to have an exact representation of the population that's assembled as the most numerous legislative branch, which is the House. And that representative density that you need to determine how many representatives do you need in order to form that exact representation. Okay? And that, the electorate that forms that body also forms the state representative delegation to the federal House, only using the representative density of one representative for every 30,000 people. Okay? Notice I haven't talked about political parties yet. Right?
Yes.
Because there's no role for political parties here. We're forming, the people are entitled to participate as equals in the legislative process. Okay? The people, all of them. Can all of them come to the meeting? Can all of them assemble in the House? No. We have 340 million people in this country. All of them can't come to.
Very true.
So they have to be through representation, but you have to maintain that equality of participation and their equal suffrage to determine those matters that are being considered and determined in the House. Okay.
All right.
And so this is why 435 doesn't even get close. We should have 11,021 representatives in the House today. And it's a requirement because 1 for 30,000 is a proportionality constant. It's not a maximum. And that means it can't change. Why? Because when they calculate the apportionment for each state based on the enumeration, that's a percentage of the representation in the House.
Okay.
That percentage has to be converted into a whole number of representatives. Okay? And the way that you do that is through a proportionality constant. Okay? And you have to have boundary conditions. The proportionality constant is 1 for 30,000. One representative for every 30,000 persons that reside within each state. The first boundary condition is not to exceed 1 for 30,000. Okay? So if you can't, what that does is you can't round up to the next whole number representative, because if you do, you will exceed the proportionality constant. So all fractional representatives that are calculated must be truncated. Okay? The second boundary condition is for the specific case that a state has less than 30,000 people that reside in that state. In that case, they can only calculate a fractional representative that will be truncated by the first boundary condition, leaving that state with no representation, 0. And in that specific case, that state gets 1 representative. Okay?
All right.
So then you have to look at, well, you take the whole number of representatives each state is entitled and divide it by the aggregate whole number of representatives for the House, and that percentage must equal the percentage that you calculated for that state based on the enumeration. And as mathematics goes, it's always exact. There is an error in that calculation, and that's the truncated fractional representative. And the way you do it, what's that?
Say the name of that again, please.
I didn't hear you.
The name of that again, please.
The name of the
You said something like Trumpian.
Truncated?
Truncated. So, yeah, so truncated what?
Representatives.
Truncated representatives. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So when it's like for the state of Colorado, which is where I'm from, you might get 192.67 representatives when you divide the 5.5 million people that live in Colorado with the 30,000, 1 for 30,000. So when you divide that, you end up with like 192.6 or something like that. You have to truncate that 0.6 representative.
Oh, that's
okay?
rounding.
It's right, you round down. Because you can't, if you round up, you will exceed 1 for 30,000. And so that 0.6 is the error. And bear with me a little bit, because I know that I'm a fancy scientist and everything, and I do math all the time. But this is where you get a whole number, and that percentage must be the same. That's why you use a proportionality constant, is to maintain that proportionality that was calculated based on the enumeration. So right now, Colorado should have 192 representatives for the state of Colorado.
192?
192.
Wow.
And if you do I've actually done this on I did a spreadsheet that calculates all the representatives for each state.
Okay.
And what you get is you get a full range. Even the state of Wyoming right now, they should have, I think, like 22 or 25 representatives in the state of Wyoming. That's the smallest state. We don't have any state that only has 1.
Oh, wow.
0. None. Okay? And actually the reason why I'm spending so much time on this point is because this is the most important assembly we have. The Senate is the most important legislative institution we have. But because that's how they determine how the states act as the union, is in the Senate. They're all equal, and that's why they have a higher majority consensus requirement in the Senate than they do in the House. You need 2/3 of the Senate, the states, to pass anything in the House. Anything in the Senate. You need 2/3 of the states. Okay. So, but whatever they decide to do, that's what they do. And you notice the president doesn't have any role or any influence at all in any of the treaties or anything that we make, because it's the states. It's by and with the advice and consent of the Senate, which is the states assembled as equals, provided 2/3 of the states. And I say it that way because in order for a state to be counted as present in the Senate, they have to have both of their senators present. Okay? And the senators, they have, each state has 2 senators, each with 1 vote, right? But the state has equal suffrage in the Senate, not their individual senators. Okay? The individual senators are chosen by and directed by the House, by the state legislature. Okay, so they are the state in the federal government, and they get their direction from the state. And what's the state? The state is constituted by an exact representation of the people, assembled as the most numerous legislative branch of the state.
Oh, wow.
So the senators don't have any autonomous decision-making or anything. They have to get their direction directly from their state legislature.
Oh.
They don't, and you can't split the 2 senators in one state. No. And if a senator isn't complying with what the state wants, the state has the right to remove them and put somebody in for the rest of their term.
Oh.
So this is where how government has to work. Okay, and you always have to have that established government authority, because when you start asking questions like who makes those decisions or who determines, that's like you got Trump and Elon Musk. They got this new government agency or whatever you want to call it that they have. Who established that, and who determined that Musk would be the principal officer?
Yeah.
And what the roles and responsibilities of that department would be, and who determined what that department did. No, they don't decide on their own what to do. The way it's written in the Articles of Confederation, all executive departments are determined by the states in what they call the Committee of the State. That was one representative per state. Okay, that's set in recess of the full Congress, and they established all the necessary other departments that they needed to manage the general affairs of the United States under their direction. So, and it's still the same today. What people don't understand is it's because we keep putting different labels on stuff, that meanings to the labels we put on stuff. When you talk about continuity and stability of government,
yeah,
that's about that's held in the Senate. They're the ones that determine. Only the states in the Senate can create a vacancy anywhere throughout the government. The president incoming president doesn't fire, doesn't choose the people for a cabinet. They don't even have a need for a cabinet. those people's terms in office, they don't even have a term. Their tenure is indetermined, and they can stay there as long as they want. Their career,
Okay.
even for Secretary of State, it's a career position. And the president, if there's a person that is not able to perform the duties of their office or is malfeasant, then it's the president's responsibility to transmit that information to Congress for the states to consider and determine whether or not they need to remove them. Okay, and if they do need to remove them, then the states in the House impeach them, which only takes 9 states, the 9 largest states, and then the states in the Senate consider that impeachment and determine whether or not to convict them. Conviction removes them permanently, dismisses them from office, and an acquittal allows them to return to office. Because what it says in the Constitution is that all civil officers, including the president and vice president, are removed from office on impeachment force. That's the first condition, and that creates an absence in the office until the states in the Senate can consider the impeachment and determine conviction.
Okay.
If they determine that it's that they can return to office, then okay, they return to office. But if they convict them, they put them out.
Okay. Yeah, we do have to conclude at this point. We got a hard stop. So we do thank you for coming on and sharing about this idea. It's food for thought, like you say. So it's good for us to think about, and it's timely and it's relevant, and it's something we can conclude with. Do you have any last minute remarks?
My last minute remark would be this. We have to assemble the states as a union before they can act as a union, especially being as how they're the established government authority. Okay, and right now we have divided government because we assemble divided partisan government, and only the states as a union they can fix this problem. They wrote the Declaration of Independence, they wrote the Articles of Confederation, and they wrote the Constitution of the United States, and the states as a union have to fix this mess to their satisfaction. Okay, they have to agree because this is states' rights to participate in the union. Okay, and I think that's a good place to stop. Is that we have to understand that much.
Oh, okay. So how can our audience support you? How can they reach out to you?
It depends. Well, I do have a GoFundMe for my book.